Hi everyone, we're going to connect the Arduino Uno to the LED display. We're going to need 5 things to do this. We're going to need the LED display, the breadboard, the ribbon cable, some wires, and the Uno. In addition to these 5 items, we will also need the diagram in the specification. We're going to begin with the ribbon cable and the wires. One end of the ribbon cable will be plugged into the LED display. The other end of the ribbon cable will be plugged into wires. The end we want for the wires is the end with the small projection plastic nub sticking out to be towards the inside of the cable, towards the gray cable. Also, we'll have the little red wire on this side. If we look at it from the top, we can see the small plastic projection sticking in towards the cable and the red wire on the top. That's the end we're going to plug the wires into. The other end for the display has the little plastic square notch sticking out facing away from the cable. That's the display end. We want the end with the little plastic notch sticking into the cable. For the display, you're going to want to use your longer wires, not your shorter wires. The wires may be a ribbon like this, or you may have just a mess of wires like this. Either one is fine. I'm going to show the ribbon, but these wires work just as well. You'll just connect one at a time instead of a group at a time. Let's start with the ribbon. So we're going to need 16 wires total. So I'm going to start by actually peeling these apart into groups of 8. It's not imperative that you get it correct. You can always add another wire later, but it's easiest if we can just get 8 right off the bat. So we have 8 wires, and I can just grab it and peel it like a banana peel. We're going to need 2 groups of 8. So you're going to need 16 wires total to do this. So whether you have the ribbon or individual wires, get 16 wires together now. So again, on the end with the notch facing the gray cable, I'm going to start on one of the rows. I'll pick the outside row. You can plug these in one at a time or a few at a time, or if you have the individual pile of wires, just do them one at a time. They should be seated all the way. So after I get them lined up, I'm pushing them in. It'll be a little stiff, that's okay. Try not to bend it, so try to insert it rather than on an angle. It should be going in straight as you possibly can, and you can use your fingernail to push against the plastic shoulder to get them seated, and there shouldn't be a visible gap showing any wiring here. So that's not inserted far enough. Now let's connect the other side to the Arduino Uno. This diagram in the specification in the section, the outputs, the LED screen, shows us the correlation between the ribbon cable and the Arduino Uno. At the top here, we have a mapping between the pin number on the Arduino Uno and the pin number on the ribbon cable. For example, in the ribbon cable, on the top left corner of the diagram here corresponds to G1. On the diagram up here, G1 corresponds to 3. So G1, this pin on the upper left-hand corner of the ribbon cable connector, corresponds to pin 3 on the Arduino board. Ground, the next one down, will go to ground on the breadboard. The third one from the top on the left-hand row of pins, when looking down at the connector from the ribbon cable, is G2, and that will go to pin 6 on the Arduino Uno. For the rest of the video, if you hear me say G2 goes to pin 6, this is where the information is coming from. Again, here's our relationship between the sockets in the ribbon cable connecting to the LED display and the sockets in the Arduino board. The left-hand side is the corresponding number on the Arduino board for one end of the wire. And the right-hand side is the corresponding socket in the ribbon cable for the other end of the wire. So we'll have, for example, a wire plugged in here in the upper left-hand corner of the ribbon cable plugged into G1, and the other end of that wire will go into pin 3 on the Arduino board. So we're going to be inserting the other side of the wires into the sockets along the edges of the Arduino. The Arduino will either be labeled on the inside here. So this over in the bottom corner is analog 0, analog 1, analog 2, A0 through A5. And here are the other numbers that we'll find in the spec, 2 through 10. We're going to put the other end of the wire in these sockets. Some of the Arduinos will also have the numbering on the outside rail, some will not. But the numbers will be somewhere. First thing you want to do, if you have a ribbon like this, we want to give ourselves a little bit of room so we can peel these back like a banana peel. Looking at the diagram on the specification, starting on the leftmost row of 8 pins, looking at the diagram, the top wire corresponds to G1. So the purple wire, since it is on top, will be connected, is G1. And if we look at the diagram, G1 corresponds to pin 3. So I'll find pin 3 on the Arduino, which is on this side, 0, 1, 2, 3. And I will insert it until there's no metal showing. And move to the next wire. Next wire down is GND. That's ground. So here we're going to need the breadboard. How the breadboard works is on the outer row, these are all connected physically to each other, so plugging a wire in any spot on the outer row connects it to any other wire electrically in any spot on the outer row. These are separated from every other hole in the board. Same thing goes for the second row, and the same thing applies to the bottom 2 rows. So the blue negative we can use for all of our grounds. So everything that we see G and D, that means ground, we can plug it into this outer blue row. Note, if you rotate the board, the outer row is red. It doesn't really matter. I'll just orient it this way, but you could orient it the other way and plug all your grounds into the second row. That would be fine too. I'm going to plug all my grounds into the outer row. The second row from the top, the second wire from the top is ground. I will plug it in to the breadboard. It can be a little stiff. Then I'll go to the third wire down, which is white. Corresponds to G2 on the diagram, and G2 goes to pin number 6, third one down, which is white. White here, G2 will go to pin 6. In the diagram, the fourth wire down from the top on the outside row of the cable says GND, that's ground. It will also go into our breadboard the same row at the top as our last one. Now the fifth wire is B, and B corresponds to A1. Now this is on the other side of the Arduino. A1. Three wires left in the row. The next one is also ground, connected in the same row of the breadboard. After that is lat, which goes to A3. And then the final one again is GND, which means ground, which will also go one row of the breadboard. So after you're done with the outer row, it should look like this. The next row, you need to plug in the 8 wires to the ribbon cable. Note, you'll see on these wires how there's exposed metal on this side. You don't have to worry about which way that points, and you don't have to worry about touching it. The Arduino device is 5 volts, which couldn't harm anyone. So now I gotta try to get these plugged into the ribbon cable. Watch out for mixing them up. It's really critical that each wire goes exactly where it's supposed to, or it will not work. If you're using a whole cluster of wires to connect these instead, then I would just recommend plugging in one wire at a time on both ends. Now this is the inner row, so we're going to start with the wire on top, which is the white wire. And that's going to correspond to R1 on the diagram, which goes to pin 2 on the Arduino. Next, I can see one down from the top, that's the red wire. That's going to be B1 on the diagram. B1 corresponds to pin 4. It can be a little difficult to get these in here. Next one down from the top, the third wire down from the top I see is black. And that's going to correspond to R2, which is pin 5. Again, this diagram that I'm referring to with R2 and pin 5 is in the specification. Next after that, it's the brown wire, the fourth one down from the top. That's going to be B2, which corresponds to pin 7 on the Arduino. Next is the 5th one from the top, or the 4th one from the bottom in the row. And that's going to be A, which is going to go to analog 0. Next is C, and C goes to A2. It's 3rd from the bottom, or 6th from the top. Last two. Green is 2nd from the bottom. That's clock, CLK, which goes to pin 8. And finally the last one, OE, the bottom of the inside row, which goes to pin 9. When we're done, we'll have 16 wires plugged into the end of the cable with the plastic outcropping notch toward the inside of the ribbon. We'll have 4 wires connected to the blue rail on the breadboard, and then we'll have wires in pins 2 through 9 and A0 to A3. Right. There's one more wiring thing we need to do. We're going to need to connect from the Arduino the 5-volt and ground to the 5-volt and ground on the breadboard. So I'll take 2 wires, again the longer wires. On the Arduino there's ground 5V, 5 volts. That should go to the red line, and the ground, one of them only needs to go to the blue line. And if you can't see them in the outside, look on the inside. They're always in the same place. We don't want 3.3 volts. We don't want V in. We want 5V and G and D. I'll just use the red wire for 5V and the brown wire here for ground. G and D means ground. On my breadboard, I can connect them anywhere, as long as I put the red one, which went to 5V, on the red row, and the G and D on the blue row. Now we have everything for our display. Let's hook up the other end. For our LED display, we have 2 places that we could plug in the ribbon cable. There's one that is labeled output. We don't want that. There's another labeled input. That's the one we want. So we take the other end of the ribbon cable without the wires, and we connect it with the notch oriented towards the outside of the display. Right where the pins go in, connect it. But we're not quite done yet. Now we need to connect also the power to the display. In the box we received a power supply that looks like this. Yours may look slightly different, but one end goes into an outlet. The other end will plug into the back of the LED display. You will not see the lights, probably you won't see the lights on the display, or it will not display correctly without being powered this way. Don't forget this step. There is a set of pins here called power, and the plug. The little plastic tab goes towards the other plastic tab. And plug this into the wall. There's one more power we're going to need to do, and that's connecting our Arduino board to our laptop by USB. So we'll take our USB cable, take the rectangular square end, plug it into USB on the Arduino, and plug the other end into your laptop. If you don't have a regular USB-A connector, you'll have to have an adapter. Once it's powered on, most of the Arduinos in the box will have a test program, and the display will be quite bright actually, and will be just a shifting blend of colors. If it's all washed out, like this, now there's a bunch of just green and red, and the colors are not as bright. If you see just green and red and the colors are not as bright, then the wall outlet is not connected. With the wall out connected, you should see a range of colors: yellow, red, and blue. Alternately, you can turn on a single pixel. The descriptions for that are in the specification, and test to make sure pixels light up on the screen.